Good morning, everybody. Thought I'd take the liberty into showing a little bit of the tweaks and the tuning that we were doing. I'm running a Fanatec Club Sport 2.5. Just a little heads up on that. It's not really the most important thing on the list here. Just gonna back out of this. I'm gonna talk about the tunes on here because I don't believe it's necessarily fair for a lot of people who just want to race. They want to practice, but they may not always understand the balance of the car. So we're going to go ahead and use an example on Monza using the Porsche, because I've been getting along with that one, especially since the update. It makes more sense to me now because the tires are doing exactly what you would think they would do, and it works well with the balance of the car, even though the car is not like a 50-50 distribution front to rear. And it seems like in most games that would be necessary to have just so you can drive the damn thing on an endurance race. Of course, that is not the case here. And I must first start off with saying how important it is to have the spring rate set at the right ratio. You can have it set high or low, but front to rear ratio is very important, and you want that to match the weight of the car. Now obviously GT3 is very sensitive when it comes to rake. Having the back end higher than the front, which helps a lot with the high speed high speed corners, because it does tend to get a little stiff, and adding rake to that will help reduce that. But that still plays a factor when you're in the slower corners. This is taking a minute to load here. I guess I got a lot of computer. Forgot about that. Alright, so let's go ahead and jump straight to it, see what the default tune is and how much different it is, because they just a couple hours ago, they made another update based on the default tunes. Go figure. Anyways, so yeah, preload is about the same as what they've always been. Same with the TCS. Engine mixture, all that, I'm not too worried about right now. I have noticed that since the update, the engines don't run quite as hot as they used to, so that's good. That means we can have a little bit of flexibility with our tape, as well as the brakes, which for some reason they keep adding 40 mil on this car. Not really a great option, but I notice also the back end does heat up a bit more than it used to, so I got to be careful about that. So for sake of balance and having a good example, I'm going to turn off this assist, anti-lock braking. So that's actually a good idea. It's rather advisable, not to race with, but to practice. And then you'll be able to fine tune your brake bias a little bit more, because you'll see it directly on the screen what tire is locking up. So that helps. Helps a tremendous amount, as long as you don't make a fool of yourself if you're online. And this is exactly what you don't want right here. It always starts with spring rate. Now since that update, I've noticed they do keep the front end from being all the way at the bottom, which isn't really that much. But I'm going to go up 2 clicks from there. It is a bit of a rough track, so we'll add a 3rd notch. Now the spring rate is absolutely vital. So let's use an example here. I forgot to set this game up in window mode. Let's see if I can do that here. And I'll pull out a calculator just so you can get a real visual on the math. It looks like I'm not going to be able to. I'll have to go back. Okay, so let's go ahead and get out of here. My mistake, my bad. Graphics, full screen. Apply that. Whoa, geez, that's really bright. Okay, so my HDR is active because I have Windows on the auto HDR thing. I definitely don't want to keep that on. That was just recently turned on. I didn't know if it was doing anything. Now I can see it's just complete overkill. Okay, so that's out of the way. Jesus. Alright, I'm going to use my card here real quick, if it pops up. Kind of looks neat, but it's just way too bright. You can't even see the clouds hardly up here. There's a little bit of an outline, but it's just way too much. It pretty much proves Windows never will know anything about what they're doing. Now let's go over here, display. It'll take me just a sec. Turn that down to like well, let's just leave it at 100 for now. And yeah, brightness is way too high or something here. Something's still washed out. Only so much you can do. I mean, Windows has always been good at one thing, and that's just breaking shit non-stop, even without your permission. Okay, so at least the settings are back. All right. So let's go back to where we were. Wheels and brakes. So you take note of the load that's sitting on here. This is obviously when the car is sitting still. It's pretty much a dead giveaway. And not street cars obviously aren't going to be perfectly even like this because they don't use ballast. It's pretty obvious. All right, so we're going to go ahead and hit the Windows key, pull up our calculator. Apparently I'm blind. Okay. So all we do, and I know there's probably better, easier ways or more accurate ways of doing this, but we're going to go ahead and add front and rear together, and we got a 710. So at this point, it doesn't tell you what the ratio is, so we got to guess a little bit, knowing that this is a Porsche. Say 0.4118, I think it was when I looked at it. I could be wrong, actually. Might be a 318. Oh crap, I forget. Let's just go with that. 296. Okay, so it's a little bit on the high side. That's basically a 42% front weight ratio, a little less than that, which I remember being something like a 43.5 in the past, so I don't know if they changed something else, but that's okay. So that's going to be our numbers, a 418 for that. So this will not change so much when you do change a spring because of the way it's sitting. Its ride height also will affect that by a small amount, but still there's no changing the fact that it is a rear engine car. So let's go ahead and turn that down. And now it's important we keep these numbers exactly the same. So it's obvious. So remember that number is a 418. So 8 plus 5, just for simple sake. Let me do a times point, do that 42%. Now it's saying a 5.5. So I could go up, and that'll change the ratios altogether. So it's important to do this over again. So 6 plus 8. Just because I can't think, I don't do math, but at least I know it better than most. And again, it's just a little bit underbite, but because of the rake, I think it's okay to leave that because we're only jumping at a 20% variable right there. Now this method, the strategy I'm using, I can confirm that it is very valid because I've actually used it ever since like freaking Forza Motorsport, which is not a simulation, but it still seems to work really well on that. Just like anything else, any other sim that you might think of, like Automobilista, Assetto Corsa. Well, Assetto Corsa's Competizione is a real disaster in my book. But yeah, let's go ahead and bring this down a little bit because I notice the car is a little bit overkill with that much rake, and you do have quite a lot of weight in the back. So when you get on the brakes, you don't want that back end to just be completely over the wheelbase to where you want to swap ends, because that does happen in the slower corners. Now we're only going to talk about mechanical grip to a point because I don't want to get too much into it and complicate the hell out of it. Like this damping system here, for example, you go down and this value goes up, so I have a bit of a rough time with that. I have to eyeball it after a point. We'll come back to it, but right here when it comes to ride height, this can get a little bit confusing, but you got to remember the main purpose of anti-roll bars. Obviously all cars in the real world, they're going to be longer than they are wider, so they need more leverage because you're still talking about the same amount of mass between all four tires. So they need a little extra leverage. It doesn't mean that they're supposed to support the car and keep it from bottoming out, like say on Spa, which would be a pretty good example, but I'm not a big fan of that track. So I'm going to turn down the front anti-roll bar, and you'll see that it has much more grip at the slower corners. mechanical grip because you're allowing it to lean a little bit more. But say, for example, when you have a low anti-roll bar on a mid-engine or rear-engine car, say you turn this down real low and this one's up high, it's not always going to make it seem stiffer, especially at corner entry. And if you have a lot of rake, say a left-hand corner, that left rear is going to lift up higher and it's going to put all that load onto the right front. So therefore, you're going to swap ends at corner entry almost every time. It does not always prove to be effective. So we're going to go ahead and go 5 and 4. We're going to be a little bit safe with this. And let's see, the arrow, it did seem like it had a lot of stiffness last time I was on the track. I think it actually was a Monza. I keep forgetting the name of this track. I do apologize for that. It's a good track too. I'm kind of embarrassed I keep forgetting it. Just do a couple of random numbers, get a little bit more freedom in the rear end. So with that being said, I try to mimic the damping because it seems to fluctuate between each sim out there. It changes the most out of all of them. So we'll go up and go 2 notches on the fast bump because those are meant for the bumps. But this is entirely meant to help stabilize the springs themselves, and it's very easy to get carried away with. So we'll go ahead and go up a little bit with the rear. Now it's a little bit complicated when it comes to the rebound because obviously you use a lot of rebound on the rear. You don't necessarily want to go overkill with that because it does mean that it will have grip initially, but it will also let that weight fly right up there, and therefore you have no control when it gets to that braking point. So it does get complicated, but relatively you want to keep these all pretty low. Now for the front end, I really like keeping this number down low on the front rebound because that allows us to accelerate a lot easier without worrying about overpowering the car. It just transfers, even though it's a rear engine car, you still need to allow that front end to lift up a little bit, because if you don't, that means the front end will still have the final say on lateral grip because it will have almost all the grip it needs just to make that corner. And the rear can absorb that based on how high you have this number. It will absorb it based on how fast it responds, and it mostly depends overall on the speeds of the corners you're in. So this is relatively slow speeds. I am trying to show a bit of an example for the low speed corners here. So let's just go ahead and take it for a spin. I don't claim to be a fast driver. I'm not a regular racer on here, but I know my math. I keep saying that like I got a conflict here. Cold tires here. But even when you're sideways, having that spring rate is absolutely vital because it does mean that you'll be able to read your car a lot better. Even if you do get sideways, you'll be able to correct it because it's balanced. Still trying to get even in the front tires. But even going over the rumbles, going over anything, if you got it balanced, it will behave. And of course, we've got a little bit of bite going on there. I could use a little more transfer to the rear. It's a little loose on the exits, that is. But it does feel natural. And remember, I don't have ABS turned on, and it's braking into the corners like there's nothing to it. So I nailed that. Probably could take a little more sway bars off the front. Yeah, there's a lot of brake force at the front there. Let's go over the back a little bit. A little bit of lock up in that left front. Guess I'm struggling to get these tires warmed up, but we'll see what happens. Normally it does take a couple laps before the car starts to settle and then you have a consistent time, but it's feeling pretty solid right now. It's really smooth. I'm not driving the best, but I'm feeling the car, and that's important for those endurance races. So I can imagine how people are feeling getting halfway through the race, fighting every inch of the way, avoiding wrecks, especially in the first lap or the first corner, let alone that. That's just a disaster waiting to happen. Everybody knows it. But yeah, after all that's said and done, then suddenly the car just kicks out or plows right into the next corner. And there's nothing to answer for it, nothing to show for it. I don't feel too great for them. But I know where they're coming from if they do get upset about it. So I want to share this video with everybody I can in hopes that it'll help improve the consistency. Because I always believe in a good race. I don't care if it's fighting for last. If it's a good battle, then you got nothing to complain about. You got a buddy, you know? Especially when things go the way you want them. Well, looks like I could use a little more duct on the rear brake there. Or close the gap, I mean. They cool off pretty quick, but they also heat up just as fast. It's almost like I got rubber brakes in the back. They're definitely grabbing better now. I'm starting to finally get some heat in there, but the brakes are just flaring right up there. Still loose on the exit, so yeah, there's something I gotta work on with that. Maybe add bump to the rear, but this is one of those moments where I have a hard time deciding because you gotta find that balance. But it didn't take much. Just one or two clicks in either direction, it changes the car entirely. Yeah, locked up on the front, I can feel it in the wheel. Now it's getting stiff in mid-speed on the exit. You can see how I had to let off. So that tells us right there it's grabbing good, but this might actually be too high on the bump for the slower corners. Doesn't have that downforce to help it out. So a lot of this, it's always made sense to me. I mean, not every game will meet ends like this, because you look at something like iRacing, complete disaster in my book. I mean, it just, I can't make sense out of it. Some of the cars are okay, but I particularly don't, I'm not very fond of iRacing. I've had a lot of rough experiences with them, but most of all, they give you a really difficult car to handle off the start as a beginner. And I just don't believe in that, not even by the slightest. You need to have a good car that's balanced. You absolutely must have that, because you've got a lot of race chemistry to work with. Being new to the field, you gotta understand how people are gonna drive without making that mistake. You start off in a rough patch, it's gonna be very hard to clear that up. Yeah, I'm actually enjoying this drive right now. I haven't really slipped that much at all. Tires are a little bit cold, but you can see where this is going. I'm not going to screw up. And that's the main point of it. I can drive all day like this, and I know that I can trust this car. But what I like most about that update is that it does make sense. And the tires do actually happen to be very balanced with the wear and tear. No ABS, guys. Oh, see, now it's got a little bit more grip. I might just leave that damn thing alone. See if I can try to push it a little bit. Get a good lap time in there. I got the computer up there like 92% or something. It's pretty hard to get the attention of other drivers when they're faster than you. I will admit to that. But if I were to sit here all day without changing anything on this tune, I'm sure I could kill another 2 or 3 seconds on my lap. But not everybody has that kind of time. It's not locking up at the rear at all. I might even try going back a little bit more on the bit. Oh, there we go, 4th place on that. So we can use the computer as a reference, a little bit of a reference there, because they are consistent. And you know they're going to drive the same every race. So lap time wise, it's a pretty good way to judge where you're going to be in the field. They're not too bad on each track. A little hot. Yeah, I'm liking this car right now. So let's see what the tires look like. Whoops. Yeah, 2% more to the rear. I am using a little bit of brake on the front, so that means potentially, like what we saw in there earlier, the front spring rate was a little bit high, but I don't think that's causing it, even though it is a big factor for tire wear. I believe it has something to do with the shocks, because that does affect it a little bit, not as much as you might expect. And then also don't forget, I got that sway bar set pretty much the same front and rear right now. It's a little bit lower in the rear. So all things combined, this is pretty well satisfactory right here. There is one factor we can't really change, and that's the size of the tires. It's perfectly normal. I don't know why, but it surprises people, but it's normal to have bigger tires in the rear, even on a front-ended car. Because you're asking that rear end to do quite a bit all throughout the track. You're always on the gas or the brake, and you're always turning. There's always a time when you're using that rear end. Using all that friction. Whoops. Yeah, I was pushing it there. Now normally you don't want to be killing the car or spinning out right before you come into the pit, because you want to be able to see the temperature of that camber. We may not get a very accurate number if I did that right now, so I'm going to go around a few more corners here. Brush the dirt off a little bit. Yeah, I kind of forgot about the camber angles and the toe. The toe is kind of a big deal. It's not anything like it used to be back in the day. A lot of us believed that the toe was a big factor for each track. It would be a lot different, but it's pretty much the same for me on this game. A little bit of negative toe on the front just to keep those front tires evened out between the two. And then the rear, obviously I can loosen it up however I want, but I never like playing with the toe in the rear. I just keep the tires lined, keep them straight. Because that differential is going to play a factor in that too. If you have the toe point inwards, that differential is going to be playing a different game altogether. It will slip on the inside tire, and therefore you're just pushing against each other. It doesn't really help anything. And yes, it's true, it does have a bigger factor than the front tires when it comes to the response time, but it's just not worth doing. It's better you focus on the bumps and all the irregularities of the surface. It's more like a finishing touch when you know you got everything you possibly get. Yeah, I was feeling a little bit stiff in that higher speed. let's go ahead and just stop it right here. Let's have a look-see. So our camber, oh, well, that's a lot lower temperature than I was expecting there. That's okay, but we got a lot of camber here that we don't need. So therefore, we can add a little more throttle in the exits. That's actually our answer right there. So this is way too high for its own good. That's why I'm locking up on the brakes. Well, we got an 8-degree difference. That's actually pretty close to what we would want. But I'm still going to knock it down there so we got a little more trustworthiness going on. So yeah, rear brakes are heating up quite a bit, and for some reason this is actually not off. I thought I had that turned off. Oh, apparently everything reset here. I know I didn't have that up to 53. This is a little strange here. I'm going to take a look. No, that's the same. Okay, I must have forgotten to change that. We might actually improve our time still. I thought that was 11. This game's being a little bit weird today. Let's go ahead and add a little bit of rebound on the fast bump. And this, trying to decide if I want to turn that down at all. Let's go ahead and go up on it. It looks so weird, 12 and 11 now. Alright, so tilt out. Whoops, we don't want that. And this, we'll just go in one notch. I don't really like going to the extreme on it. And yeah, let's just go ahead and get ballsy here. Turn that down a little bit. What else? I hope I'm not forgetting anything. Turn this down a little bit so we got a little more freedom on the slower corners. It's always a good idea to focus on that first. That way you got the mechanical area out of the way instead of complicating it with the aero, because you want the car to handle naturally. And then when it comes to aero, it won't be as big of a change as you might expect. The rake is definitely a big factor, but it's a more simplified solution to that. So we'll just call it P right now. Alright, so let's go ahead and start again. Actually, let's keep our tires on. Kind of want to keep track of that. Keep our same tires here. So we got a 4% gap here and 5 on the left. And those are the inside tires around that track. So that means I'm burning out a little bit on the throttle. And maybe the brakes are locking up more than I realized, but it's hard to say. These are just perfectly even between the two. So that's something to think about there. Okay, now it's showing 87. I had lower numbers when I had new tires on, so maybe it didn't record anything. I'm just a little bit confused here. Yeah, I had these both at 20. So let's go ahead and put that down to 20 and then keep this open, because this is starting to get on my nerves. I know I changed that. I don't know why I forgot about it. Whoa, getting out there. Alright, so whatever lap time I was hitting, I totally forget. I wasn't really paying attention to that. Just focus on the tires. No burnout. So yeah, the tires are scrubbed. They're showing a very big difference in that, the way they start off. Whoa. Good brakes on that. Still a little stiff. But I'm liking how the rear end is planted. That's really nice. Even under braking. It was pretty rough on the car right there, and it didn't even phase it. So, whoa, there it goes. Had a little bump, hit that crest right at the apex, so the front end dug in a little bit more, got that extra grip. Even though I had to wait towards the front, it seemed like it benefited the front end a little bit. The back end couldn't keep up. So that actually, believe it or not, has a little bit more to do with the rebound. I guess a good way to look at it is rebound for reaction, bump for the preemptive, the post corners. It's kind of a layman's term in a way, but there's of course a lot more to it than that. Because you don't want the car to look like a bar of soap around the track. You need it to move. Even though the rules of aerodynamics, you want the car as low as possible, close to bottoming out without actually touching the ground. This is true, but when the car doesn't handle very well, there's not much point in driving at all. If you're in the wall, that is. So of course you want even tire wear. But mechanical grip is an absolute must. You got to get that spring rate down. And I didn't have to change that. It might even be a little bit on the high side. I could lower it. Ooh, there's some lockup. Big one. Alright, so we'll go ahead and turn the bias way down. Try to push our limits, find out where that sweet spot is. I know I'm going to be using up that rear tire quite a bit. Still the front. Probably got a flat spot on there now. So you can see it is rear engine, and now it's starting to show its true colors here. That ABS turned off. Yeah, I feel that vibration. I got it bad. Alright, so that was a fast bump incident right there on that right-hander. Hit that curb and it was gripping pretty good. Back end couldn't keep up with it. Yep, and again, so I got something going on there. I'll probably want to back off on that bump I changed. Or no, I turned up the rebound, that's what it was. On the rear. So giving it more freedom means it'll be able to respond a little bit faster. But having a high rebound at the rear means it will also support the front end. So of course, you don't want to overdo that because that back end will come out and bite you in the butt or something. I should just shut up. 153.29. Yeah, same tire. Alright, so still locking up at 51. Not a surprise, because I really messed up bad on that first lap, but that's alright. So now we know we don't want to do that. We're going to go the other way. And that's going to be pretty much the same as the front bump. And by coincidence, it really does seem to land on that quite a lot for my other cars. Fast bump also, or fast rebound is also, I'd turn that up a notch, and I forgot about that. But that's okay, we'll leave it be. Turn that down right there, because obviously it's not like we're trying to keep the front end down that low when we're hitting a bump. I'm thinking about turning this up, but we'll wait. We'll wait before we do that. We got to change our tires. Yeah, it dropped a whole 3% from what it was. What it would have been. So I'll go ahead and start off with new tires again. Get a whole new set. And then see from there. See if we can get our lap time. Anyways, that was the main plan. Of course, I'm not using ABS. I thought I wasn't before. So I'm trying to keep that off for fairness. To really elaborate on my tune. Also want to spare the rear tire wear a little bit if I can. There it is, the whole burnout. But yeah, scrub tires are a huge difference right there. It's kind of neat they did that. Oh, yeah, it feels stiff again. Yeah. Front end is getting along with the bumps real well, but it's not like the rear. Maybe it is bottoming out right there. I forgot I was thinking about dropping its spring rate a little bit, but we're going to leave that alone for now. This is all for the sake of finding the balance in the car. I do spend a lot of time with that damping. The sway bars are pretty easy for slow speed corners, but when you do get into higher speed tracks, it can make things a little bit interesting because you got to work with that and the rake of the car. because if you want a lot of rake, obviously you're going to have to make a compromise there with the rear wing, or perhaps you also got to change. Ooh. More lockup. We're down to 50. Starting to wonder if that rear end will ever lock. Rear end overheated. Yeah, that's how you find your potential for your braking. You gotta try it out for a few laps without the ABS at all, because it's not going to show you the same effect. That's a long way from what the default was. Still the front end. A little bit more. Now it's starting to get a little bit loose. Pretty much every track does have a slow corner in it, but they don't always have a lot of high-speed corners to them. As you can see, the majority of this track is all about that. We only got one corner into this high speed before coming into that section. And it's a pretty brief moment in the track. There's the right front. Even below 50%, yeah, I toast it. Even at below 50%, it's still locking up at the front, so that's actually pretty interesting. See what they look like. Oh, that's different. So we're not wearing, well, it was the lockup, but it still means that we're pretty even on the wear. That means that the damping does have an effect there. Quite a big one. So high damping is not going to help with tire wear. It's going to make it worse. But it doesn't mean the car is going to handle bad. That, and of course, don't forget, even sway bars here, it was still handling pretty alright. It was a little bit on the stiff side, because again, rear engine, it's going to have more weight back there, but it doesn't mean that it's going to fly all the way to the front every time you're in the corner. You're going to have that mass hanging up at a higher center of gravity. So that's all I got for you. Just work on that spring rate, make sure you get that ratio down. And of course I got these Packers here. I forgot all about that. So there's lots to improve on. That's why I wasn't bottoming out. I'm never going to know until I get that down. I got to see those sparks fly. That's alright. But anyways, this should definitely get you a good start. Spring rate, and then look at the sway bars and ride height, of course. They kind of go hand in hand. I'm a little bit curious about the camber. Yeah, I was locking up a lot, so the inside of the tires are going to flare up quite a bit there. I didn't do a lot of times turning. So that's very typical to happen. Alright guys, good luck to y'all. Happy racing.